Hi, folks. Good to go?
Yep.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to start off by saying on behalf of our Manitoba government that we honor the sacredness and importance of this land and of the ancestors that once walked where we're standing today. The Anishinaabe, the Anininawak, the Dene, the Dakota, the Inuit, and the Anishinaabe nations and the Red River Métis Nation who paved the way to what is now known as Manitoba, home to all treaty people. Today, we are releasing our second quarter report for the current fiscal year. Climate change and Donald Trump's tariffs have had an impact on Manitoba's bottom line. But our fiscal path remains clear, and we're committed to balancing the budget. As we foreshadowed in the first quarter report, the impacts of climate change have been significant. We've experienced the worst wildfire season in 30 years and one of the largest evacuation efforts in living memory. While Manitobans came together in inspiring ways to respond to these fires, there was a real fiscal cost to the provincial treasury. In addition, we're seeing the impact of a historic drought. Manitoba Hydro is reporting that water flows are tied for the second worst year on record. To put it mildly, it hasn't been this bad for over 80 years. And like the other provinces, we are also seeing the impacts of President Trump's tariffs. While our economy is still projected to grow, it's growing more slowly. We've added fewer jobs than anticipated, and wages are growing less quickly than we initially forecasted at budget. The fiscal impact of drought and wildfires are unexpected in-year costs. These things are largely outside of government's control. But if we set them aside and look only at the expenses and revenues that are within government's planning and forecasting, we see that it would be within the deficit targets we set in our budget. In fact, excluding the wildfire costs and hydro's variance, the deficit would be $803 million. This is just slightly ahead of Budget 2025's $796 million projection. Now, while I can't celebrate these numbers today, I can see that our fiscal plan is viable and is responsible. We're managing this government responsibly, and we're reducing our deficit. Our commitment to balance remains, and our path is achievable. When we were elected, we hired MNP to conduct a post-election financial accountability review. One of the key takeaways from that review was that government should be open and transparent with Manitobans about the state of fiscal finances of the province. And today, with our second quarter report, we're being honest with Manitobans about the effects of wildfires, drought, and tariffs on our economy and fiscal finances. Folks, when we released Budget 2025, we were projecting a deficit of $796 million. Today, with our second quarter report, we're projecting a deficit of $1.661 billion to year end. With any fiscal update, there are pluses and minuses, but the large increase in the deficit has been driven predominantly by two significant factors, and I'll address each in turn. First has been the impact of wildfires. While the receipts are still coming in, we are currently projecting an expense of $374 million, which is $324 million over the $50 million we set aside in budget. As foreshadowed in our first quarter report, we are also conservatively booking a recovery from the Government of Canada for wildfire expenses under the Disaster Financial Arrangements Assistance Program in the amount of $150 million. Although the final recovery amount from the Government of Canada will likely change with the third quarter report and public accounts as the final bill for wildfires comes due, the net cost of the wildfires to the Manitoba Treasury is currently projected at $174 million as of this update. The second major driver of the increase to the deficit has been the impact of drought on Manitoba Hydro's projected net income. As noted in the second quarter report, this year's water flow is forecast to be tied with the second lowest on record, with the lowest occurring in 1940-41. These are some of the worst water flows we've seen here in Manitoba in 80 years. The impact on Manitoba Hydro's bottom line is significant. When Budget 2025 was released, Manitoba Hydro was projecting a net income of $220 million. However, with this historic drought, Manitoba Hydro is now forecasting a net loss of $464 million, which is a variance of $684 million from budget. As I indicated off the top, the significant increase in the deficit this year has been driven by events that are outside of the government's control. When we introduced Budget 2025, we were projecting a deficit of $794 million. If we exclude the net impact of the wildfires and the impact of the drought on Manitoba Hydro, the deficit would have been $803 million. I don't want to diminish the impact of the deficit this year, but after factoring in what is truly in the government's control, excluding these extraordinary one-time events, the government's fiscal plan is intact. We have a plan that is responsible and achievable. I also want to provide a brief economic update as well. When we released Budget 2025, we included our base case scenario alongside a tariff budget, which included a downside scenario that accounted for large tariffs and reciprocal retaliation from Canada. That downside scenario forecasted that the GDP could be reduced by as much as 3.8%. Manitobans' incomes would be reduced by $1,400 per person in that scenario, and government revenues would be reduced by almost $560 million. This would be a recession. Other provinces have seen GDP impacted by tariffs. BC is projected to be down by 0.4%. Ontario has declined from their 2024 projection, and Quebec's projection for next year have also slowed. With that in mind, Manitoba is in a much brighter place. With our second quarter report, we're projecting that Manitoba's economy will grow by 1.1% this year, and employment will grow by 1.4%. The good news is that Manitoba's traditionally resilient economy has indeed proved resilient, aided by our historic capital plan, which helps put people to work while building badly needed infrastructure. While the economic update is significantly better than the downside scenario forecast at budget, it is still worse than the base case scenario. Manitoba is not immune to the economic shock that is tariffs, and just like other provinces, we are seeing the impact on our GDP. Trump's tariffs are real, and they are having an impact on provincial revenues. As I conclude my opening remarks, I want to end with some good news. There are some green shoots on the horizon. Recently, the Conference Board of Canada released its 5-year provincial outlook. And in that outlook, the Conference Board noted, and I quote, "Alberta, Ontario, and Manitoba will lead the provinces in non-residential investment between 2027 and 2030, end quote. This investment is key to growing our economy and creating prosperity for Manitobans. It's our role as government to do what we can to drive this investment, increase productivity, and create good jobs here in Manitoba. Earlier this fall, the Premier released Manitoba's Economic Development Strategy. A key element of this strategy is converting the manufacturing investment tax credit for machinery and equipment into a retail sales tax exemption. Simply put, as a government, we are putting in place the pieces to incentivize investment in our manufacturing sector and to harness the opportunities we see on the horizon. While this has been an incredibly difficult year for Manitobans, from wildfires to drought to Trump's tariffs, our future looks bright. We're weathering the storm this year together as one Manitoba. And through the challenges of this year, our community has truly come together. It is this sense of community, of resiliency, and of shared determination that gives me confidence that we are moving on the right track. So thank you, and with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
So how do you get to balance? Let's imagine a future year, despite climate change, as you mentioned, where all wildfire and flood costs are within that reduced $50 million envelope that you set aside each year. How do you get from $800 million deficit to zero in 2 years?
Well, I appreciate the question, Stephen. The first thing I'd point to is that we were left with a $2 billion deficit by the former government, and we reduced that in 1 year to about $1.2 billion, so about 42% reduction. And we saw that confirmed in the last public accounts. So we're showing that progress already. This year, of course, as we've outlined here today, we are seeing these in-year impacts of a historic drought, historic wildfire season, and of course the impacts of tariffs. which no province in Canada is immune to. But as we look to next year, we do expect that those in-year, out-of-control items like for example, the wildfire season that we saw this year that was extreme, as well as this extreme drought that we find ourselves in, that those will be in the rearview mirror and we'll be able to return back to a more normal operating environment. So we have a plan and we're executing on that. So as we said today, if it weren't for the wildfires and the drought and the tariffs, we would effectively be at target right now for deficit. So as we look to next year, we'll continue to execute on that plan. A key piece of this, of course, is continuing to do everything we can to create the conditions in Manitoba for more economic growth. And so the Premier has made some, I think, really exciting announcements in the last couple of months around an economic development strategy that's focused on growing more manufacturing here in Manitoba through initiatives like taking the PST off new machinery and equipment. We've seen historic investments in Churchill and the rail line to Churchill, and we know that there's a lot that's coming forward as it relates to more investments in northern Manitoba. And of course, we brought forward a $3.7 billion capital plan that's seeing us build the infrastructure we need to support more growth in our economy. So our plan continues to work. Again, this year, we're seeing these in-year challenges, but we're going to stick to the plan. Again, knowing that with this longer-term perspective and ensuring that we focus on what we committed to Manitobans, which was a balanced budget in the final year of our mandate, we're going to keep working to ensure we deliver on that.
So how do you get to zero, though? Because, you mentioned the $2 billion deficit in the previous government. $500 million of that is a family settlement that could have gone either year. How do you get from $800 million to zero in 2 years?
Well, there's 2 budgets from now until that balanced budget year. So again, this is about doing the work that we've been doing as a team, which is doing multi-year fiscal planning. So for example, this year we're launching in right now into our estimates process. Every department has been given clear targets that support getting to a deficit number for next budget that will show that incremental step towards that zero or that balanced budget that we want to print 2 years from now. So again, it's about staying on plan. And again, I'll remind folks that this is a very important takeaway. We are on track this year if it were not for a historic wildfire year and a historic drought. So how do we do it? Well, the plan is working. We're showing that we're making that progress. We've made significant reductions on the deficit that the former government left us, and it's about continued delivery on that while we do this other important work of, again, continuing to foster more growth in the economy. So we've got a plan. We're delivering on it. Next year, ideally, we'll all return to a relatively normal operating environment without historic drought or wildfires. And again, how will we get there? It'll be spelled out very clearly in terms of what you're seeing in terms of estimates for departments in that upcoming budget.
Notwithstanding the nice idea that we're not going to have climate change next year, but how do you prove or demonstrate this $270 million shortfall in income tax is actually due to tariffs?
Well, again, so what we're seeing across the country is this impact to provincial GDPs that are recognized to be a function of those tariff impacts. And so in Manitoba, we're no different. We're seeing a slowdown as a result of that, and that is being reflected in our personal income tax numbers. So that is reflecting slower job growth, and unfortunately, that's having an impact on our bottom line.
Do you remember us asking you about your optimistic growth predictions, and if you were concerned that they might be a little optimistic at the time? Do you remember those questions from us?
Oh, I get a lot of questions from the media, but
Yes or no? Forgive me, Minister.
Well, what I do remember at budget was talking about the very real risks that we were facing as a province, as a country, from Trump's tariffs, and a very unnerving 3.8% GDP reduction scenario. And the good news we're here to bring to Manitobans is that while we're not hitting the GDP growth target that we'd projected, we're not seeing the full scope of that downside scenario that we might have otherwise endured. And I think that's a reflection of ultimately the good work that we're doing in partnership with businesses here in Manitoba, and also a reflection on the diverse nature of our economy here in Manitoba.
I'll put this in slightly more blunt terms. How do you prove this $270 million shortfall in income tax revenue is due to tariffs and not due to an overly aggressive growth prediction?
Well, again, So we, in developing these, these numbers in terms of PIT or CIT, personal income tax or corporate income tax numbers, these come to us through teams of economists that support us. And in terms of characterizing the drivers behind them, again, we look to those experts for interpreting those numbers. Experts tell us this is what we're seeing here is the impact of Trump tariffs starting to bear down on those income tax results. And unfortunately, again, we're seeing that not only in Manitoba, but across the country. So Manitoba continues to fare well and hold strong, and we're weathering the storm together. And again, according to the Conference Board of Canada, we're seeing as a province projections that Manitoba will be a province where we're expecting above average growth in years to come.
What are you going to do then next year if you have one or the other of a forest fire year, or yet another year of Manitoba Hydro not being able to crank up those hydroelectric stations to full capacity, given that the water levels actually right now, they are still at about the 10% decile range of where they normally are. So what's the contingency here, plan notwithstanding, given the fact that we're probably heading into yet another third straight year of drought conditions?
Well, we'll continue to budget accordingly. And so as a government, we prepare for the worst. We will put contingencies in place to ensure that if we do continue to see those challenges next year, we will have budget prepared to respond to that. And so it's about preparation and ensuring that that preparation is in keeping with our broader target, which is ensuring we deliver on a balanced budget goal. You're asking questions about future year water levels and so forth, and the best we can do, again, is prepare accordingly for what might come. And that's exactly what our government is doing.
Last question, I'll let somebody else get in on here, forgive me, is wouldn't it have been prudent, given all these headwinds, to have reduced spending overall to give yourself a little bit more padding? Especially considering you're talking about getting to zero within your term.
Well, I would say we did prepare accordingly. One thing we did in this budget was we not only had a $50 million emergency budget line, but we also increased our revenue contingency for this year in response to what we thought was an elevated level of risk. And as you can see in our Q2 report out today, we're proposing to use that revenue contingency to help respond to some of the challenges we've seen at Hydro due to that drought.
Could there have been a little bit more foresight with regards to hydro and the drought conditions, as my colleague just said? It's been 3 years of this, and it's so much money over budget. That the government is claiming the drought conditions are responsible for. But I'm just curious, could there have been more foresight in terms of preparing for these drought conditions when the budget was announced?
Well, so Manitoba Hydro has an entire process and approach to forecasting water conditions in any given year. That approach, it takes into account historic water flows for years going back, I believe 40 years. They also combine that and pair that with weather forecasting predictions over short term and medium term to try to come up with a forecast that builds on our existing position within our reservoirs. Look, it's tough for hydro to predict that you're going to have the second worst water year on record. This is an exceptional year. Again, I think it's tied for another year in the 80s, but aside from that, it's the second worst year since 1940-41. So very difficult to prepare for that kind of a change in hydrology. Listen, I think the way that we need to respond to that is to ensure that given this is creating more and more concern about the reliance of that hydrology, we need to lean and ensure that we look at other energy resources as well to make sure that we're starting to balance things out perhaps a bit more. And I think that's exactly what we're doing with our commitment to expand wind in partnership with First Nations. So we're bringing in 600 megawatts of wind, and that'll help to, I think, diversify our resource base a little bit going forward. And I also believe that our IRP that we've brought forward, and which some of you may have already seen, will also help to support responding to some of those risks. But of course, this kind of a deviation from a projected net income level, it's not good, and certainly not something we wanted to see.
Minister, this 374 number, does that include the cost for doing a review of the wildfire season and response?
I believe the answer is no. I believe that's separate to that. So we had $50 million in emergency budget to respond to the wildfire. Above and beyond that, there was an estimated $324 million in wildfire costs, making for a total of around $375 million. And I do not believe that the costs of the review are baked in there, but I'm going to ask the team to maybe follow up with you to make sure that that's confirmed.
You mentioned that have been some directives that have gone out to departments to tighten their belts. Can you expand on that? Have those been delivered already, and what are they?
I don't, no, I did not mention that. What we've done is, and I think maybe what you're referencing is earlier, I alluded to the fact that as we look forward to future fiscal years, we're going through our conventional budgeting process. And as part of that, departments are all issued targets that will help to ensure that they're contributing to us delivering on a deficit position for next year that will continue to show progress in meeting our balanced budget commitment.
So will there be any updated targets for this fiscal year to different departments with regards to their spending for the remainder of the fiscal year?
No, so again, the situation we find ourselves in is a function of Donald Trump's tariffs and climate change. And so when you combine the significant revenue variances from Trump's tariffs, in addition to a $680 million revenue reduction at hydro because of a drought, plus $375 million in wildfire expenditures, you could see how those have, of course, created a significant in-year impact. But these are in-year, one-time costs at this point, those wildfires and those droughts. And so looking forward, again, we expect to return to normal operating conditions. And so we're executing on our plan. If you were to remove those costs this year, we would be at more or less right at our deficit target. So this is not a time to cut programs or to look at making significant changes that might further risk a slowdown in the economy. We want to make sure that we're continuing to move forward. Again, if we take those one-time costs out, we're essentially hitting at target this year. And so next year, we need to continue moving forward with that plan to deliver on our commitment to Manitobans, which is to deliver a balanced budget in 27 and 28.
We expect then there will be a higher percentage of the budget next year going towards environment climate change based on the numbers that you've showed us today in your chart?
Towards which types of costs?
2026.
Is there a specific type of investment you're curious about, or you just mean broadly for?
This is, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so.
Contingency, Minister.
Sure.
Yeah, well, we certainly will continue to ensure that we have dollars available in contingency to respond to these types of challenges going forward.
Are you looking at any further tax increases? Because I know that the education property taxes is paying dividends after the changes you made and after recent increases at the local level. For the upcoming budget, are you looking at any tax increases?
What we're looking at doing is ensuring that we continue to keep life affordable for Manitobans. So there's been a lot, I think, of really important initiatives we brought forward from the time we've come into government, starting with, of course, the elimination of the gas tax for a full year. We've now brought in the permanent cut to the gas tax. There's the hydro rate freeze, which we brought in for a full year. This upcoming tax season, Manitobans are going to benefit from a $1,600 reduction to their school tax bill. And of course, you pair that with the broad personal income tax changes we made, where we're seeing increase to the basic personal exemption and changes to the brackets that are favorable for families across Manitoba. We have cut taxes pretty much across the board. So what Manitobans can expect from us is that we'll continue to make life more affordable going forward, because we know that families do continue to face some affordability challenges.
Cut taxes across the board except for property taxes, which of course are up primarily this year because you got rid of the 50% rebate and went to the flat. You acknowledge that?
Yeah, we brought in first a $1,500 education property tax rebate that saved, I think initially it was almost 80% of Manitobans were better off as a function of that change. This year that goes up to $1,600. And ultimately, this reflects our government's recognition that we need to be doing everything we can to reduce costs for Manitobans.
No, I'm talking about the first paragraph of page 13 here. Significant upward contributor to the consumer inflation with property taxes. Primary component of that was getting rid of the 50-50 break and replacing with a flat break. You acknowledge that, right?
No, what we acknowledge is that for almost 80% of Manitobans, they were better off as a result of the change that we made.
You remember he Never mind, I'm not here to argue with it. I was giving you an opportunity to acknowledge this statement here in your own document.
Yeah, well, you talked about cost of living and affordability. To pick up Bart's argument, the two budgets you've delivered both had tax changes that resulted in more tax revenue being paid by Manitobans, not less overall. And now the inflation rate has come out, and there's this 19% whopper on property taxes in Manitoba, far above every other province. Granted, these are monthly snapshots from StatsCan. But numbers today, Manitoba is leading the country in inflation year over year, a year change month to month. And that's primarily a big driver of that is the property taxes. So when the tax changes page on your budget in the spring, will that be a net negative for people paying less, or will it be like the previous 2 years, people are paying more?
Well, again, so we're focused on the question of education and property taxes, and this is something that we were proud to respond to, again, with our first budget, with a $1,500 rebate, which has now gone up to $1,600. As a function of the change that we made and moving from the previous government's mechanism to what we brought in, initially, almost 80% of Manitobans were better off. And that, I think, goes a long ways for Manitobans across the province. So there's no question that that measure did have a significant benefit for what you would call your more average everyday Manitobans. They really, I think, saw a big increase in the amount of money that they had left over in their pockets at the end of the year because of that change. If we do talk about, the big change there, some of the drivers of inflation, we do know that Stats Canada did identify that this was, they specifically called out some of the tax changes at the City of Winnipeg level, including new changes in sewer treatment upgrades and garbage fees. And they spoke to that as a key driver. But again, our role is focused on trying to do everything we can to keep those cost pressures for Manitobans as low as possible. That's why we brought in that big suite of affordability measures. And again, lots done, more to do to keep making life more affordable. And that's why recently the Premier has been talking a lot about the importance of acting on food prices. We were proud to bring in Bill 31. We're already starting to see more competition among grocers here in Manitoba. Again, more to do on that front. And we're looking forward to continuing to work to lower food prices as well. So I think, this is a government that is absolutely focused on making life more affordable for residents of this province so that people can have more money left over in their pockets to take care of their families and meet their day-to-day costs of living.
So Minister, specifically that 19.5% increase, what would you tell Manitobans? That's as Steve pointed out, that's a pretty high number. So what's your explanation for that?
Well, again, you're pointing to municipally driven tax increases. So
The education tax. It's not just that, right?
Yeah.
So what is your response? Why are we seeing this number here, 19.5% compared to this time last year?
Yeah. Well, again, so in terms of those municipal cost increases, we know that it was an assessment year as well. So there was probably some additional pressures there that they faced, but I can't speak to, of course, all the dynamics behind why municipalities made certain decisions in that regard. What I can say is that our role is to make sure that we're helping to support Manitobans to reduce those costs. And so that's why we brought in an education property tax rebate that's helping to reduce those pressures for everybody.
Sorry, Minister, you think assessment years change the total revenue of taxes collected by municipalities?
Well, it drastically would have increased the value of houses, which would have increased the level of taxation on homes.
In fact, assessment years simply readjust within the city. They're assessments all on their own. They simply look at what neighborhoods in the city, for example, in Winnipeg grew more than others. They don't actually increase pools of taxes at all. Forgive me. Sorry, 20 years of covering City Hall. I apologize.
Yeah,
But
happy to discuss.
Yeah, we can. Just happy to discuss. We're simply trying to state, you got rid of the 50-50 in your budget line, as Steve points out, as Maggie points out. Every year, more revenue, property taxes have been collected, provincial property taxes under your government than before. Here comes a piece of paper from you saying, this is up. And now you're saying, so you're going to say on the record, it's because of municipalities. I'll go running over to the mayor right after this. He'll probably, this is here. You're going to say this is because of municipalities. That's what you're saying.
Well, again, what we're saying is that as it relates to bringing in, the question is around revenues, and it relates to education property taxes and that specific revenue line. There are a number of things driving that. But what we're here to talk about is the work we're doing to help reduce that pressure for Manitobans, reduce those costs. And I'm proud of that, what we've done there. We've brought in, again, starting with a $1,500 rebate. It's now up to $1,600. And this is providing a benefit that, for the vast majority of Manitobans, is putting more money in their pockets than what they had under the former government.
Will the province commit to putting any caps or guidelines for property tax increases among school boards then in the new year, with regards to a big lump sum of this was obviously the increases to property taxes, education property taxes, some of which were double digits this year. So what is the government going to do, if anything, about that come education funding time in February?
I think the important thing is ensuring that we continue to fund education at the rates that they need to be funded at. So for many years, education was not funded properly under the former government. They received zeros in many years. It was a very challenging time for school divisions across the province. That created a lot of pressure for them. And, to help ensure that we minimize the size of those levy increases and those cost increases for Manitobans, our government has ensured that we've started to finally restore funding at adequate levels to school divisions. So 2 years in a row, we've ensured that school divisions have received the fair funding levels that they deserve and that they need to support kids in communities across Manitoba. We're going to continue to do that, and I think that's an important piece of ensuring that we minimize those pressures at all costs.
Although, Minister, as a result of the status quo, sort of you're pointing a finger, but finger comes back around to the government, because allowing the municipalities to raise and the school boards to raise property taxes is part of the reason why the municipal property tax bills are higher. What do you make of that reality?
Well, again, right now, we're focused on ensuring school divisions get the support that they need, which they didn't receive for years, along with municipalities. It's important to note that municipalities got zeros for year and 0% increases year over year over year. Finally, our government has committed to restoring proper funding levels. We've given 2 years of twos to help depressurize some of their costs, and we've committed to continue to do that. So again, when it comes to supporting municipalities to help meet their obligations, as well as school divisions, there's no question that our government has turned the page from where we were after many years of underfunding from the PCs. Municipalities and school divisions were being put in very, very difficult positions where they had to make cuts. Finally, they've got a government that is committed to supporting them so that they can meet, the obligations they have and ultimately keep costs low for Manitobans.
Minister, just doing some back-of-the-napkin math here, the amount of money the province takes in from education property taxes has gone up by more than 30% since 2021-22 as the various rebates and credits and things have changed. So now that you're on track now for the first time to collect over $1 billion in education property taxes, is there something the province is eyeing to ensure, as Maggie said, that these things don't continue to escalate because you're giving a flat rebate as the raw cost escalates?
Yeah, so again, our focus continues to be on making life more affordable. This year, you're going to go from a $1,500 rebate to a $1,600 rebate. So that's already this year at tax time. You're going to have another $100 in your pocket as a Manitoban. Again, we're going to continue to make sure that school divisions are funded at the levels that they need to be funded at. We're going to continue to act as great partners to municipalities who, after years of funding cuts, are now again working with a provincial partner that's working to ensure they have the funding supports that they need. And ultimately, while we do that, we're going to continue to offer a range of affordability supports that will keep costs low for Manitobans.
Big picture, Doug Ford came out in January this year, said, you know what? Tariffs have changed everything. We need new mandate from Ontarians. And they had an election, and PCs returned back to power there. What's the prospect of you guys doing that next year? You've been saying for 4 years, balance, balance, balance. It's looking increasingly difficult, notwithstanding the fact you have a plan. What are the prospects of coming out next year and have your leaders say, you know what, we're not going to balance, so we need new mandate based on the fact that things are not looking like the way they were looking?
We're not going to comment on any future plans. We'll just say that we have still a lot of work that we have left to do. And I think we're really proud of the amazing progress that we've made so far in fixing healthcare, making life more affordable, making our streets and communities safer. But there's a lot more work to do, and our government looks forward to continuing to deliver on that.
Minister, can we take it back to where you started, which is
Sure.
going on about this historic climate change year? So what has the government learned, and what are the takeaways if this is just one-time expenses? But in developing the plan next year, what are the takeaways from this historic year, given climate change is not going away?
Well, I certainly, I would say that we have learned a lot this year about, of course, the risks that we're seeing as a result of climate change. We, I think, put some important measures in this year's budget to prepare, and we had contingencies in place to support allowing us to work through this year's challenges. And I would say next year will be no different. Look, we have to plan for the worst. And that's exactly what our government will do. We'll continue to be ready for what comes. That preparation will be in the form of contingencies. And again, there's going to be continued variability when it comes to Manitoba Hydro. And of course, this was a historically tough wildfire season for Manitobans. We are really hoping that next year we'll return to perhaps a more normal type of environment. But those risks are there. And we've committed to that study to ensure that as we move forward next year, that we're going to be even more prepared to support Manitobans through it.
Go to Zoom.
Great.
We have Zoom.
Could we go to Zoom?
Oh, had we known there was Zoom. we
Order
probably
on Zoom.
would've shut up.
Radio Canada, Alex, one question and a possible one follow-up.
Oui, Excellence de Radio-Canada. J'avais une question. Est-ce que vous pourriez revenir en français sur comment les changements climatiques et les tarifs ont creusé le déficit et comment le gouvernement, surtout au niveau des changements climatiques, allait réagir pour le prochain budget, vu que, comme on l'a dit un peu plus tôt, les changements climatiques ne vont pas partir de si peu?
Je m'excuse, mais c'est pas possible de t'offrir le commentaire en français, mais je suis content plus tard we can provide commentary afterwards, I think, but unfortunately I wouldn't be in a position to offer you that in French.
Oh, so later on it would be possible, or?
Come back and talk to the best of my ability and do a French language interview, but we'll talk to the team offline here if we could.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
That's it from Zoom. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks, guys.
Thank you, folks.
I've you in French a million times and I know.
Yeah, Minister, that was really good French.